cannot do the kind of eloquent introduction to Jeff Hewlett. Wow, this right here. But just for a moment, we're proud of the work of the Joan Ganz Cooney Center. Mindful of Church's independence, that I was there when it was created. And I am proud of where it is now compared to the dream that it was 7 years ago. And the Cooney Center came out of a question from Mrs. Cooney. And the question was, where is the media for those children that graduate from Sesame Street? And the answer we'll talk about earlier today. And 7 years ago was an issue. Today it's an issue. If we do not solve it, we'll be an issue tomorrow. Where is the media for those graduates of Sesame Street? Today's really special. This morning was wonderful. But now I'm reflecting on what is the possibilities for Sesame graduates. Jeff, I think you're a Sesame graduate. Our speaker will remind every girl on the planet that if you're a Sesame graduate, you can be a commissioner at the FCC. Talking to Joan Cooney some weeks ago, about a year ago. Joan, share one of your passions with me. She said, oh, I wish that the games that were made by Sesame Street early had continued and been built upon and not gone away. And she said, oh, how the noise in the media space has confused children and parents. And those wannabes, lookalikes, pretends are now denying folks the richness of that intentional media that at Sesame and others taking the great responsibility of not playing with the minds of children, but only putting in front of them those images that if they follow them, if they do them, they will turn out good. That's our duty, that's our job. So I had the privilege of meeting Commissioner who came to visit Sesame Street. And she asked me that day, so what's Sesame up to? And I'm going to share a little bit about that conversation. And I said, we see the world where all children have a voice, where all children get images that will inspire them, propel them to become the best that they can be. And I have in my head this image, this graphic of, we call it the gears. The center gear is this round thing with gear wheels, and it's a child. And as that child's world turns, it engages other gears. Child in the center, then there's some other gears. There's one on the right. It's content that's intentional. And the gear on the left, it's measurement of what that child is doing, what they're learning, how they're doing. And so, we believe you can get good content and give feedback about what the learning is, you can actually engage with that child and progress. But then there are two other components. There's the gear on the top. It's the parent, the family, that adult that is really caring about what that child is learning. And on the bottom, it's the teacher, the one whose job it is to make sure something gets in the child's head. So as that child's world turns, how do these other components engage in a way that the best possible images, experiences can be delivered to that child so that that child can grow? So we talked about it a little bit. And this morning we've been talking about how to make those gears come together. The importance of technology. The importance of access. The importance of quality measures, quality inputs, quality images that are just good for the child. So our commissioner, one of the things that I treasure about you is your prior experience before you got to your current job of actually working in the hills, on the Hill and the halls of Congress, learning how to deliver messages of truth to positions of power. When you advise such powerhouses as Senator Rockefeller or Senator Inouye, not necessarily sleepers, but on the importance of access for all, equality of privilege or opportunity, so that our societies, our communities, our children in particular, get enriched because they're not being denied that which is good for them. So you've had a history of learning those issues, being voice for those who have no voice, and speaking with a voice of authority to those that can do something about it. And now as you sit, you're dealing over some of the most complex issues of our time, spectrum auctions, just all, and tomorrow, 1 penny more. Her child, all of it. We as a people, we as a nation, are privileged to have you at the helm. Because with you, and personally knowing that Grover is your guy, we believe that the interest of our children, the interest of our communities, the interest of us partnering with those who can engage in us, teachers, communities, after-school organizations, creators of content, owners of distribution pipes, all of those elements can come together so that that gear of the child can appropriately turn and not be shut down because one of them is failing. So you're here. I want to give you maximum time to share your vision and your time. We thank you for making this time available. I'm sure you could have been at home as well with the snow, but you're here. We're delighted to have you. The Joan Ganz Cooney Center thanks you. We at the workshop are proud of all of the association. Come on and share with us.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the Cooney Center for having me here today. Thank you also to Vicky Rideout for inviting me and for the incredible blue-chip work you do on children and media. I should also say thank you to Jeff because you've given me some material for when I get back to Washington and I see my colleague who is Columbia's out there. It's been a profitable trip. Thank you to Melvin for that really kind introduction. I actually met with Mel very early during my tenure as a commissioner at the Federal Communications Commission. And it seemed like the right thing to do. Because I am a Sesame Street kid. I was among the first generation of children to watch and learn from the small screen antics of Big Bird and Friends. Even better, my children are Sesame Street kids. They too know about sunny days, sweeping the clouds away, and how to get to where the air is sweet. But how we got here to this new digital world, that's another story. But I want to talk about this digital age and the opportunities it presents for children, for media, and for education. Now before I do, I want to tell a quick tale. So imagine, it's 1966, and Joan Ganz Cooney, who was just here, and the namesake of this center, she decides to gather friends and colleagues for dinner. Now this dinner, it takes place in an apartment some blocks south from here. She's a producer for Channel 13, which many of you probably know is the first public broadcasting station in New York. The table includes Louis Friedman, who is her boss, and it also includes Lloyd Morissette, an executive at the Carnegie Corporation and an expert in funding educational research. So, conversation at the table turns to the possibilities of television. Now before I go on, let's just think for a moment about television in 1966. That means glass screens encased in bulky wood panel boxes. It means antenna ears. And it means changing channels by turning the dial rightward with a noisy set of clicks and sometimes pliers. The number of channels was limited, and we watched what was on when it was on. So, in 1966, that was the Green Hornet, That Girl, and the Jackie Gleason Show. So, as the story goes, Lloyd Morissette began to speak about his daughter, Sarah. She was fascinated with television. At age 3, she apparently sat before the glow of the set and turned in to watch test patterns before any programming even lit up the screen. She also had memorized a slew of commercial jingles. In fact, she could sing them on command. So, in time, conversation over dinner migrates. If television could capture a child's attention like that, what else could it do? So the question at that dinner was not whether or not children would learn from television. The answer was obvious, they would. The question was, what could they learn? So you might look back on that question, that dinner conversation, and think nothing especially novel about it. But actually it was sort of radical. Because in 1966, it would have been easy to write television off as a tool for teaching. After all, it was only 5 years earlier that President John F. Kennedy's chairman of the FCC, Newton Minow, famously called television a vast wasteland. So shrugging off the educational possibilities of television would have been simple. It would have been the conventional wisdom. But instead of discounting this powerful platform, they decided then and there to explore what empowering things they could do with it. And in due course, history was made, because that small conversation led to something big. It led to a study funded by the Carnegie Corporation on the power of television and the possibilities for education, preschool education in particular. And that study gave shape to what became the Children's Television Workshop and yielded Sesame Street. And in its wake, a whole range of quality children's television educational programming followed. Okay, so that's the story. Now, speed to the present. The gale force of digitization is remaking our world. We live in an age of always-on connectivity. The number of screens has multiplied, increased broadband capacity, and decreased costs of cloud computing are changing the ways we access content. So many of our social spaces are now virtual. And mobility means the invisible infrastructure of our airwaves is responsible for so much more than television. In fact, we are now a nation with more mobile phones than people. Curious fact. 1 in 3 adults has a tablet computer, and that number is growing fast. Our children, however, still watch an average of 3 to 4 hours of television a day. Now, according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, that means that by the time they graduate high school, they will have spent more time watching television than they have in the classroom. But as screens proliferate, our children's habits are changing. 3/4 of all children now have access to a mobile device, like a smartphone or a tablet. 72% of children under age 8 have used these devices for some kind of media activity. Almost 1 in 5 now do so on a daily basis. Among teenagers, half own their own smartphones. 9 in 10 have used social media, and 95% use the internet regularly. Now that's a whole slew of statistics, but as Jim Steyer from Common Sense Media suggests, we may think of our children's online and mobile activities as their digital lives. But that's totally wrong, because their plugged-in network world is their life. So, just like those guests at that dinner a few decades ago, I think we need to resist the easy temptation to dismiss the possibilities of so many new screens, connections, and technologies. Because the fundamental issue is the same. It is not a question of whether or not children will learn from these new digital platforms. They will. The question is, what could they learn? So that's how I look at these issues from a policy perspective. And candidly, it's also how I look at them as a parent. After all, I am someone who knows the challenge of a household with 2 parents, with 2 jobs, with 2 children at 2 schools and too few hours in the day. I also know that good parenting sometimes requires just turning it off and shutting it down. Still, I think there is real promise in new digital media. We have within reach the ability to call up quality programming when we want it, where we want it. We have a whole new realm of interactive and educational media that combines text, video, and gaming. This can multiply opportunities for joint media engagement between parents and children that researchers like Vicky teach us are so important. Just as important for the busy parent, these opportunities can occur anywhere because we can take our connected devices everywhere. So, from parenting back to policymaking, we need to seize the good in these new media platforms, just like what was done with television more than 4 decades ago. Think about how the work of the Carnegie Commission spurred the development of Sesame Street. Think about how that made quality preschool programming viable and widely available. Think also about how the Children's Television Act spurred the development of more educational programming by requiring a minimum of 3 hours per week on stations using the airwaves. And then ask what we can do now to stimulate more quality digital age educational content and make it more widely available. So that leads me to what at first glance might seem like an unexpected place. It leads me to E-Rate. If you're not familiar with it, E-Rate is the nation's largest educational technology program. It helps connect all of our schools and libraries to modern communications and the internet. Now, E-Rate support is based on need. More funding is available for those schools and libraries serving low-income students and those located in rural areas. The program is run where I work. It is run by the FCC. Legally, E-Rate is a byproduct of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Now think back to 1996 for a moment. Everyone in this room probably called the internet the information superhighway. At least I did. I will own up to that. It was a long time ago. And back when the law was passed, only 14% of the nation's public schools had access to the internet. Today, thanks to the support that E-Rate provides, more than 95% of our classrooms are connected. Now that might sound impressive. And it might sound like the E-Rate job is done. But that's totally wrong. Nothing could be further from the truth. Because the challenge today is not connection, it's capacity. Too many of our E-Rate schools access the internet at speeds as low as 3 megabits. That is lower than the speed of broadband in the average American home. But in many cases, those schools have 200 times as many users. Think about all of those students. Then think about what that means. It means too many schools do not have the capacity to even offer high-definition streaming video. It means too many schools are unable to take advantage of the most innovative digital teaching tools. And I think this is especially cruel because it means too many students will lack the ability to develop the science, technology, engineering, and math or STEM skills that are so essential to compete in the new economy. So now the good news. We are doing something about it. At the FCC, we recently started a reform effort to put in place a modernized E-Rate system. It's what I like to call E-Rate 2.0. We are gathering ideas and combing through commentary on the program from stakeholders of every stripe. In the end, we want to give this program a new focus. We want to make it a program that is focused laser-like on supporting more than simple internet connectivity. We want to make it support capacity, really high-speed broadband to all of our schools in every community. So let me tell you a little more about that by putting some numbers on that, so you understand what I mean by really high-speed broadband. In the near term, I'd like to see 100 megabits per 1,000 students in every school. I call that dream likely. Over the long term, by the end of the decade, I want to see 1 gigabit per 1,000 students in every school. I call that dream big. And I think we can do it. I also think the E-rate reform effort and the interests of quality educational content collide. And I mean that in the best possible way. By bringing really high-speed broadband to every school in every community across the country, we will create new opportunities for educational content at new scale. This scale has the potential to stimulate a new market for digital educational media. This could be especially powerful for content aimed at older children, those Sesame Street graduates. As so many studies have demonstrated, there is an alarming drop in educational media use after the very earliest years. While we have succeeded, by most measures, in reaching preschool children with educational television, we have a much more mixed record with older children. But here is where I think these new interactive digital technologies and mobile platforms are full of possibility. They can engage beyond simple text and video. They can target communities with unique needs, and they can reinforce essential skills through gaming. And by bringing high-speed bandwidth to schools everywhere, I think we can spur a whole new range of providers to develop this kind of educational content. In addition, a reformed E-rate speaks to the issues of equity and access that informed the work of the Carnegie Commission 4 decades ago. That is because a reformed E-rate program will also make broadband more widely available. Today, a stubborn 3 out of 10 households do not have broadband access. Think about what it means to be a student in one of those households. Typically low income and often rural. It means getting homework done is hard. It means applying for a scholarship is challenging. But by bringing broadband to all of our schools, we will make digital age opportunities more broadly available. So, as you might be able to tell, I think E-rate reform is important. I think it speaks to the mission of so many of you in this room. Because if you care about educational media, E-rate could help stimulate a whole new world of quality content. And as I suggested at the outset, the question is not whether or not children will learn from this proliferation of so many new screens, connections, and technologies. They will. The question is, what could they learn? So a generation ago, Joan Ganz Cooney and the Carnegie Commission harnessed the power of television to provide a powerful answer to that question. They taught us that television can teach. And they showed us that it can help build early literacy and numeracy skills that lay the foundation for later learning. I think now we can do even more, because we are at a new and exciting inflection point in educational media. With an updated E-rate, we have an opportunity to harness digital and mobile technologies and teach in new ways. Plus, we can extend the reach of broadband in our schools and expand the range of educational content. In short, we can seize the good in these new technologies and help prepare all of our children for success in the 21st century. And as a policymaker and a parent, I think that's worth fighting for. Thank you.
And maybe if you could tell me, to the audience as well, what the timeline is for the E-rate modernization and what's going to need to happen to realize the vision.
Thank you. That's a terrific question. I've been talking about this issue and reforming E-rate almost since I got to the agency. In part because before I came to the agency, I spent some time working for Jay Rockefeller, one of the original authors of the E-rate provision in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So it had been beaten to my head what a valuable provision this was. That wasn't violent. It was told to me over and over again. But what struck me most about it was by letting this program continue on without really rethinking it, we had missed an opportunity to build infrastructure in this country, to create possibilities for new educational content using digital media, and to push a vision of educational equity that comes with giving everyone access. The agency where I work, the FCC, began a very big reform proceeding on this over the summer. Not the best time to start an initiative that affects schools, but we are moving, I think, at quick pace for Washington and a regulatory agency with an eye towards having some reforms in place as a matter of rules by later this spring. But I would certainly encourage anybody in this room who cares about these issues to be involved. This is bigger than the usual suspects that come before the FCC. There are bold and important things we can do, and E-rate can stimulate. So I would encourage you to get in touch with my office. Be happy to put you in touch with the right people at the agency who are taking in ideas and studying these issues as a matter of technology, but also as a matter of educational content for new media.
Great. Dale, you had made a couple of comments during your remarks. I don't know if you want to say anything about the unexpected consequences associated with CTA or other things that you've been thinking about. Here's a nice opportunity for you.
No, Jessica is she's very sympathetic to my view. Oh, thank you. But the one thing I would say is that if you go back to my comments, I might have gone by this pretty quickly, but I talked about how you need content production and you need a distribution channel. And one without the other is not going to work either way. And so what Jessica Rosenworcel has talked about is we've got the distribution channel, but it's a bottleneck. And so we've got to open the bottleneck to then free up many, many more opportunities. I'm really enthused about this vision of that being a catalyst to generate more market activity, because I think the shortcoming is that somehow we don't have the Sesame Street of the example or anchor, sort of example to get parents to pay attention to this. To say, oh, we can have really good stuff in the medium, and that's different than looking through, as someone else talked about, 1 million apps. How do I find the good one? How do I separate the wheat from the chaff? But nothing's possible unless you have both. So you're speaking to the right audience here, that's for sure.
Okay, just a quick follow-up on this, Jessica. This is the last thing you asked me to do. What can this community do to be helpful to you around E-rate and the kind of equity agenda that you just
If you think what I've described to you matters, I'd encourage you to get involved. We have an open docket, we take in letters, we hold meetings, and as an FCC commissioner, my phone usually works in my office.
It says universal service.
That's what supports E-rate. I think our proceedings are at their best at the agency when we hear from the communities that are not traditionally before us. So I would encourage you to get involved. I'm going to call out Clint Odom, who's sitting here, who works in my office as my policy director, and like myself has a history both at the agency and on Capitol Hill. Someone you can reach out to if you can't reach me. His phone usually works too. But I would encourage any kind of way you want to be involved, even merely sending us letters about the importance of this activity for education, for equity, for whatever kind of input you see fit.
Great. Jeff, you wanted one last thing?
Yeah, I have just
I hope this will be as provocative as.
When you talk about the connectivity, and by the way, thank you for your bold goals for connectivity in the future. Hopefully we can get there. But when you talk about the connection speeds available at schools,
Yes,
most of what we know about those is self-reported by those schools.
that's true.
And as someone who spends a lot of time in schools, let me say that some of that information is incorrect and others, I have no idea where it came from. Do you think that in the course of modernization, you might change the process by which we come to know what the classroom experience is of students with access to the internet?
That is a great question. I think one of the cruel oversights in our program is while we take in a lot of information, we don't take in information with precision about what speeds are available at every school. And if we want to make progress, we need data, because that's the first way that you start remedying that. So that absolutely needs to be part of the reform. But I'd also add that a lot of the schools that I visited, and I probably have not visited anywhere near as many schools as you have, but what strikes me is that they're making a migration from a model where there was a computer lab down at the end of the hall with desktops, stuff that comes big, bulky, shrink-wrapped equipment, and the students migrated and marched down there once or twice a week. That model isn't the one we need. We need to be moving towards a model of one-to-one device learning that takes advantage of wireless LANs. And we need to wire our students accordingly. And it's the migration from that computer lab model to the one-to-one device model that I think E-rate can help foster. And it's not a moment too soon. We need to do it now.
One last one, David Cleveland.
Commissioner, I'm David Kleeman from Play Collective, formerly with the American Center for Children and Media. I spoke this morning. And I just want to challenge on one thing. You mentioned at the beginning the programming that came out of the Children's Television Act. I would say that it was actually a failure in the long run. That in the early years, there were some efforts to come up with creative programming. One Saturday morning on ABC was a great effort. I would challenge anyone in this room to name a current program for kids over the age of 6 that is on broadcast television as an EI program, and I challenge them further to find a 6 to 12-year-old who could name a single program. And the market has changed around that. I think Dale was onto something wonderful this morning, or earlier today, about funding for new content and for sort of changing the marketplace in terms of educational content across platforms. We tried with the National Endowment for Children's Educational Television. Dale, the one thing I would challenge you on is that Arthur came out of that. So some good things did come from Nessie. But I'm wondering, how can we get the content to fill the pipes that you're talking about?
You know, listen, I'm familiar with the ups and downs of the Children's Television Act, as I know Dale is, and I think that those are legitimate criticisms. But I still believe in the power of public policy to be the kind of stimulant that can create markets that didn't exist. Because I think the idea was right. The content that actually came about from it was mixed. But the idea that by creating an obligation, by creating a stimulant, by creating a catalyst in public policy, you can pressure for more quality content. What I like particularly about E-rate is that content gets filtered through the schools, people who are education experts. By filtering Children's Television Act content through the decision process of the broadcast stations, we got them to self-assert that this was, in fact, good content and educational for children. And so I think one of the limitations of what we got out of the Children's Television Act is not also present when it comes to using E-rate as a catalyst. If that makes sense.
Thank you so much. As we have our wrap-up session, but I think we were just so encouraged, Commissioner Rosenworcel, that we've got a fighter for kids' issues in Washington. The policy context is often toxic, and what you just said is so very encouraging to us that folks are fighting for the kinds of issues that we all believe in strongly. So thanks again for spending the time with us. So we're going to do a little bit of a wrap-up. I want to just propose something to you. We've got a little bit of a structure for a last session, which will take advantage of the collective talent that's in this room. We've got some slides based on some of the implications that Vicky laid out in her report and some of the listening that we've done this morning. We've got a good dessert for those of you who have not already gorged yourselves, waiting for you outside. They have proposed that we're going to go until 2:15. We're going to just take the next 20 minutes. I want to get you all involved in setting a little bit of an agenda. We're not going to get so far here, but we want to take advantage of the talent that we have in the room to do the
Safe travels.
Roy, are you going to set it up?
See you too. I'd enjoy that. Bye-bye.
That's fine. Yeah. So, So, hang tight. We actually laid out several different action items that were connected to the discussion this morning and to the outline so usefully laid out by Vicky Rideout in her report. And let's see whether or not, let's go through these really quickly, see if we need to add any others, and then we're going to get into a little bit of a lightning round of your advice and what we can do both individually and through collective action. So there's this possible disconnect between what parents say and what we might call independent assessments. There's clearly a need, particularly for some parents, according to their demand, to add more information sources around good for you and educational media. We documented throughout, thank you so much, Stefan and Charlotte. We documented throughout the day this connection, this disconnect between the needs of young children, which are being filled, I think, with greater dexterity than the needs of older children. We've been very much on this issue of equity and cultural responsiveness, as well as the desire with the newer mobile platforms to figure out a new plain learn pattern. We didn't talk too much this morning, but the report points out that according to parents, there's at least a lot of equity in their view in literacy and math, and much less around science-oriented media. Again, this equity issue, not just for Hispanic Latino families, but the ethnocultural diversity of America with the needs of Hispanic Latino families are something that's on many, many people's minds for obvious and good reasons. There's a series of issues that have come up around gender equity, and then Lori and others talked a little bit about the desire to have more potential unlocked through joint media engagement with the youth co-viewing. So is there anything that we really missed here? That's a lot. Are there big issues that you think, if we were to have a forum a year from now, recounting the action items that we were able to attend to, that you would feel like we missed something big? Ed?
I just wanted, and it relates to the Commissioner's conversation about E-rate. I think that those people who are involved in programs for low compulsory school aids that are nonprofits that serve children and families are not eligible unless they're a public school or tied to a public school or a library. So I think it would be great if we have some kind of a round robin to begin to get some information about what kinds of things people are actually using.
How to gain the infrastructure that E-rate is providing for K-12 and for preschools attached to K-12 in place for Head Start, child care, communities, and so on. Vicky?
I guess just more explicitly thinking about funding streams for quality content and delivery platforms for those most in need.
Both supported publicly as well as through private capital?
Whatever,
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, just to make, because the market forces don't always work naturally.
Amy?
Yeah, I'd like to see more discussion about the motivations that
Parents and caregivers have for giving media devices to children and making different kinds of selections. So understanding the motives might help us better predict what sort of outcomes we would expect.
Yeah, good. Warren, and then David, and then, I'm sorry. Oh, hi, Sherry. Sherry,
I think CETA was onto something big with the triangulation idea, looking at one piece of media from different theoretical perspectives as well as consumer group perspectives. That helps us get our head around the whole situation. Another thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is that one company is in charge of 90% of the children's digital content, not only delivering it, selling it, monetizing it, and reviewing it. They choose which get the editorial stuff, and they control the reviews. It's not Google yet, but hopefully Android will step up to the plate. But I think that's something we should be thinking about.
Yeah. Sherry, go ahead.
Many of the items that are on there relate to content, which is critical, but I would also like to see a more explicit mention of media, the need for media literacy skills to be developed around children and families, so that the people themselves have we still need common sense media, we still need lots of other sources, but the ability for us to have some of that assessment capability within so that we can bring that to whatever we do.
Good, David.
Yeah, I would say also, in addition to the infrastructure and E-rate, which concentrates on connectivity, in addition to focusing on connectivity, one thing we all hear a lot about with Ready to Learn is the devices. And low-cost devices, how can we get more devices into schools, into informal settings? So that would be an interesting thing to think about. And then also, just to what Amy said about motivation, not only for, I would say, for mobile device use, but just in general, motivations for continuing having their kids on a learning trajectory would be really important.
We're going over here and then back to March.
Hi, Marcia Truchinsky from the Metropolitan Museum. I would just like to make an appeal to my colleagues in the room to broaden our thinking so that it's not just media learning that takes place at home or in the classroom. And remember, cultural organizations are where your peers, where your partners in crime in this, and we inhabit dual spaces. We are physical spaces that people visit, but we also inhabit the virtual space. And we're changed. We're probably different than what you thought of in the 90s.
Not your father's a metropolitan.
Yeah.
Great. Chandler.
I think there are also collaboration opportunities, just as we're talking about how content providers.
Chandler's from First Book.
I'm with First Book. Interested in looking at access opportunities for those at the bottom of the economic pyramid. So how might those of us with networks of these programs hold hands to harness the power of scale to lower the price for those at the bottom of the pyramid? So we'd love to explore that thread as well.
Great, okay. Lisa, and this is great. Lisa, Anita, Renee, and Carol. Go. 20 seconds.
Teachers were listed, 40% of parents were saying they were going to teachers to find out what to use. Is anything on there about helping teachers recognize or think about quality? Yeah, it's a professional development for teachers, essentially. I think needs to be part of this.
Perfect. Anita.
I was kind of going the same way in the connection between school, home, community, across the board, and that also goes from from a demographic point of view, but also the whole idea. I don't know if we've really captured in here the transmedia, and really how do we look at this holistically? Because we're talking about TV, we're talking about mobile, but how do they all work together?
Marge.
I just want to call out a major technological challenge that designers and developers are having right now. Those of us in public media in particular, it's a huge priority to be platform agnostic because it's free. And a lot of people have been talking about transmedia today using the mobile web. And this question would be to David too. The challenge is that now that we can't use Flash over a mobile web, HTML5 and other technologies are extremely limited. And they're getting better all the time, but they're limited in animation and audio actually, which is, I talked earlier about character engagement and story. That's a direct, challenge to that. And so we need to improve the technologies quickly, but also it's a funding issue because we're building a lot of stuff right now that's sort of the best we can do for now, but then it's probably all going to have to get rebuilt in a couple of years. And budgets are doubled. It's a big challenge.
Carol.
Hi, Carol Lacey from WNET as well. One of the things, whether we're thinking about content, we're thinking about distribution, we're thinking about devices, I think one of the things I'd love to bring into the conversation in terms of action is making sure we include youth voice and youth engagement as part of that process. Let's have the young people also giving us their input on what they want, where their education's going, what they love, what they don't love, what's having an impact on them.
Great. All right. Go ahead, Andrew. But then I'm going to go to the next. We've got to get going on.
Thank you. Just one quick intervention here, and that would be to have, we know that we're, I want to hear more about the roach without a head. And I want to just, in all seriousness, I want to suggest that content, production of content be examined in the context of what young people today need the most and where the skills and career pathways are going. And it's in science, technology, engineering, and math, where probably 70 to 80% of the jobs over the next couple of 3 decades will occur. And we saw the statistics about science in the slide presented earlier, which was dismal. And I think we really need to focus on really being very selective about what content we focus on going forward.
Okay, so here's what I want to do in the final, these are great issues. What we're going to do with this is we're going to be putting together a couple of different features, on the forum today. For those of you who are interested in the presentation that the FCC commissioner made, it's already online. We'll, send it out to all of you. Robert Torres has mentioned the 5-page plan for Bill Gates, which we'll make available to all of the other resources, including some of the talks and blogs. So we're going to try to organize this community to pay attention to some of the input here. Right now what I want to do, and I want like 5 to 7 people, again, 20 or 30 seconds, describe, having thought about or listened to these priorities, initiatives that are in progress that we haven't heard about or that needs an extra boost in terms of the imagination of this collectivity. And then, so these are sort of, I don't know, what did the commissioner call them? Dream likely, things that are kind of underway or going to be underway. And then I'm going to ask you for some of the must-dos that we can do together. Are there some must-dos or dream bigs that you'd like to bring to this movement that we can then move on between now and the next time we get together? So, who wants to start with initiatives in progress that are responsive to what we heard so far? You want to squeeze it there? Go ahead.
Sure, kind of.
I'm Gabrielle Miller with Raising a Reader. I have heard so much today around family engagement, the role that we have in helping parents understand what they can understand, they may not do. So maybe as we start to see family engagement on the rise and its visibility from the Department of Ed, we see family engagement opportunities for funding over and over again, maybe we can find the intersection between family engagement and these technology outcomes that we hope to. So sort of ongoing initiatives, but also extending. A little bit of both.
Is Lisa Kane still there? Hand it over to her. So Lisa, you've got an initiative in progress. What can we do to help you?
Lisa already mentioned this project, this collaboration together. Speaking on behalf of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which is trying the next 10 years for at least 20 states to increase by 100% kids reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. And you heard the data earlier, which is not good across income, but particularly for low income. And so this project is really thinking about the opportunity of how to use technology to support parents to address summer learning loss, to promote school readiness, and maybe even to help kids to attend school every day while reimagining what school could be. I made up that last part, but we should do that.
Okay, we're going into that.
I just started a venture nobody's heard of because it's 3 weeks old. It's called Speakin Informado, where I'm sort of amplifying and or gamifying canonical works of classical music. So I'm very much I'm a musician, I'm a deep believer in music and the arts. You generally hear about reading and STEM and things like this. So I'm looking for anybody that can be in this room who's an arts person, because I think just the very beauty and harmony of the arts has value from learning. You can't test it, but it's real and it's there. I'm trying to get into the fans. It's called Infinite Informada. It's all 3 weeks old, so I don't have anything to share.
I would also like to continue the conversation and focus on older kids, because as the commissioner said, with E-Rate 2.0 and access to schools, I'm just wondering why we stopped at 10.
Yeah. Lisa.
I have an offer and a request. We provide academic summer programs at Chicago Public Schools and New York Public Schools for middle school students who are often mandated. And we would love those of you who've done really terrific outreach with parents, especially the parents who we're talking about. We have a great opportunity. We're in summer school, so anyone who wants to help us do a really cool, authentic outreach to parents in summer school this summer, let me know.
Helen.
Mind in the Making is using technology to reach families, but in a very different way. Families are very eager for understanding the science of how kids learn across the spectrum, STEM, sciences, literacy, math, etc. And we're bringing videos that have the research in them but we're bringing them to families and teachers together so that you form learning communities rather than the educators or the professionals teaching families, learning them together, setting goals for kids together, and getting excited about learning together.
Great. Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison from Breakout. We're focused on digital games in the classroom, so we have Game Up as one of our core focuses right now. And we're really looking to get great games in front of kids and teachers, so if there are any developers that need help getting games in front of kids and teachers, and we also focus on bundling those games with support to make implementing as easy as possible for educators. I would love to talk to you about it.
Great, Carol, real quick.
Really quickly, can I speak? Okay. I just want to offer up, wait, is it on?
That's good.
We have CPB and PBS in the room. I wanted to mention American Graduate Day as a really great opportunity. I'd love to solicit people's advice. If you don't know about it, it's a 7-hour public television broadcast that happens every September. We're hoping to do it a third year this year to CPB. It is really focused on getting young people through every graduation in their lives. I'm happy to say year 2, which took place this past September, we made a big push in partnership with Sesame Workshop to make early childhood a big focus of that, knowing that if we don't obviously get kids off to the right start, they're not going to make it through to every graduation. What we'd love your help on is helping us think about, we have 7 hours of TV that go out nationally across the country. We're looking at content strands over those 7 hours, and you guys might all have some ideas about that. We're looking at groups to highlight. We highlight nonprofit groups that are working with the formal education environment. And most importantly, and very much in line with what we were talking about today, we're trying to find common measures of impact. How do we know what we in public media can do to help all the nonprofits that are working so diligently, so hard in this space? So lots of areas of opportunity. Would love your input on that.
Okay. One last comment over here, and then I'm warning. I'm coming back to Dale, I'm coming back to Lisa, I'm coming back to Amy, I'm coming back to Vicky. I want 5 ideas or must-dos for action. One of those.
Hi, I'm Liz Moses Johnson. Under an initiative, I'm part of a company called MosaMax Science Detective, and we're reviving the types of science resources that are available in the middle school classroom. You guys are probably not surprised that most science resources feature an older Caucasian male delivering information in a lecture format. These short science videos, it's an African-American female girl who presents information in a mystery format.
All right, 5 minutes for 5 must-dos and then cake. Who wants to start? Yeah, go ahead, Vicky.
I know everybody wants to be about innovating the next thing, but I think there's some really good services that are already provided by people here. And I'm thinking of the Children's Technology Review and Common Sense Media ratings and reviews. And I can't tell you how many forums I go to where people say, I wish, parents get up and say, I wish there was some place I could find out which apps are good for kids and which aren't. And I always have to say, there is a place. And I mean, we just gotta, I know this is really self-serve, like I'm kissing up to Cedric over here, but I just feel like one of the big things from this survey was we need to get more information to parents about media options. We have the infrastructure for ratings and reviews that exist through these 2 organizations and probably others that I don't know of. We should really just fund the heck out of them and make sure they get to those who need the information.
And Cedar, are there 2 things in 20 seconds that this community could do to help you besides get you a load of money?
Get the word out as well, in addition to what we offer parents. Fight, which I mentioned, is what on this platform for teachers. Any and all ideas for how we can broaden the base would be highly welcome.
And Warren, a comment?
Subscribe, Visa, MasterCard. We're self-funded, so when you subscribe, you help keep us independent. There's no advertising, so we're like Consumer Report. So definitely, it helps a great deal. And I think having this triangulation idea, having different review sources that are good, our children deserve nothing less.
Yeah, great. David, come on. What's the must?
Particularly for older children, I'd love to see research being done around what kids feel is educational, how they feel they learn from media, and compare and contrast that with what their parents think is going on.
Amy?
I'd like to see us expand our ideas about what constitutes diversity. Because we've spoken a lot about race and ethnicity, SES, but I think there are other important considerations, including developmental and regional. The second thing I think we as a group could do is expand our ideas about what are benefits. So I loved the notions of awe and curiosity. And I challenged the researchers in the room to start to develop measures to track that and then be able to persuade larger communities that these are important outcomes.
Beautiful. Lisa, Dale, and then we're wrapping.
I think to engage the larger audience of people who care about early education and even K-12 education, we've got to recognize the transfer to the offline world that happens when children have engaged with media, whether they've been kind of inspired. So how can we measure when a moment online or watching something leads to the creation or that awe and that wonder in an offline and tactile way as well?
Dale, reinforce us with a must-do.
I think you must do this, and it's going to take a couple of years, but I think it's probably one of the most valuable things you could do. People have talked about getting information to parents, and it's important to help them identify sort of the wheat from the chaff and the apps and so forth. I want you to do a study that will change parents' attitudes about the importance of educational media. Sesame Street, or it was called Sesame, Children's Television Workshop, before it became Sesame Workshop, funded a study which most people know as the ReContact study. For those of you who don't know it, the ReContact study took some data from University of Kansas where they had tracked children's educational media use 10 years ago, tracked them all down, and demonstrated that those that were heavy educational media users early did better in school, significantly better 10 years later. What if you did a study, a long-term study, though it takes time to bear fruit? You get the front page of the New York Times where you said it's demonstrated that if your child is using educational media, they're going to have huge advantages over their peers. Every parent wants their child to have huge advantages over their peers, and they sort of know it implicitly, like, oh, some of this stuff's got to be good, but which isn't? I can't figure it out, it's too hard. So there's lots you need to do in the short term, but that's the most valuable thing you may do in the long term.
There is a plan in the works to do that. You'll have to come to next year's forum. I just wanted to say, I wanted to say thanks to Lori for recording all of this. We're going to.
But Brianna,
I did.
So we
are going to be in communication with you. There are lots of resources about the new record, about the blogs that you've heard about here. Oh, sorry. Anyway, I was just recapping that this has been a tremendous day. We're going to keep in touch with all of you. Thank you so much for coming. It's still cold outside, in case you didn't notice. So linger. We have this space for a while. It's Friday afternoon. You don't need to go anywhere unless you do. There's dessert, there's coffee, and most of all, there are the great colleagues that you all are to share some more time with and to plot how we're actually going to make a difference in the lives of kids. Thanks for coming to Learning at Home Forum.